Hello, well, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on when you are listening to this webinar. Welcome to Cascade's webinar on the AWS services from the new region, which is in Cape Town, South Africa. So my name is Kevin Durman. I'm the CEO of Cascade, and with me is Russell Warren, who's our Chief Customer Officer. How are you doing, Russ?
Doing very well. Very excited to talk about what's popped up in the Western Cape.
Absolutely. We definitely are very excited about it, and many people in the industry are extremely excited about the various services. The companies are starting to rush to the cloud. But what exactly does it mean? So what are some of the things that we're going to cover today, Russell?
So the question of what exactly does that mean, I think was the first question, if you had anything to do with AWS, would be, what are we going to see? So primarily, that's what we're going to be talking about, is to say, for me, as a person in the IT industry, or for someone who's not in the IT industry, but is obviously running their business systems in IT, so there's a data center in Cape Town, great. What are we going to talk about? So obviously, we want to cover what the services are. So the key, it's not everything. So although it's a full region, and by full region, we mean 3 availability zones, so 3 separate locations, availability zones, and the way that the data centers are constructed still have 150,000 servers in them and storage and all of the fancy stuff that AWS have put into their data centers that have made it the leader really in hyperscale infrastructure and cloud. That's available in Cape Town.
Now, normally and probably in this instance as well, the guidelines for their availability zones is that they've got to be separated by at least 25 kilometers. And that's to ensure that if there is any natural disaster, that they aren't all affected. So if you're using redundancy between the availability zones, which is quite a common way of architecting solutions, you're safe there with the independent power supplies, independent cooling, and the geographic separation from them as well.
Yeah, and those bring with them immense benefits for companies that would not have been able to do so because it's just financially impossible, either to provide their own infrastructure or to go and get that from someone else. Can cost really prohibitive amounts of money for a lot of companies. So we're going to detail some of those services. I think it's really important that we look at what those are and what they mean, even for people who are in the IT industry who have not used Amazon Web Services before, or still have services. Sometimes it's not always clear. There's a couple of jokes going around just generally of how AWS choose their service names. They're never, it's not a favorable joke because the services, sometimes the names are completely random, like they put something to a hat or pick on someone's child's name or whatever the case may be. So we'll cover those a little bit as well.
Yeah.
Obviously talking, and the important thing is, what does this mean? So what? This is all tech talk, and it's great and it's cool. And what's the opportunity for business? Should I do anything? Are there things that maybe you shouldn't be doing? And that's really the stuff that we're going to focus on in this short segment.
So many people out there are probably thinking, well, why do we need to go through some of the services? And it's not uncommon for when a region is launched for AWS or for Microsoft or Google for that matter, that when they launch in a particular area, they don't make all of these services available initially. They want to bed down some of the technology and they will go with some of the things that are more common. So this webinar, we're going to go through those services, highlighting the essential components of it and what you can actually do with that.
That's right. And to your point, there's only 262 menu items to click on when you have AWS console. Right, so those are all distinct services. And in fact, if you click on any one of those, you open up more options. So I understand it'd be very difficult for a person to just go in and say, oh, I want to start using AWS. Where to start is always a big question. It's hugely overwhelming when you're trying to see how all these bits fit together. So hopefully today what we'll do is, and maybe in some ways fortuitously, the way that the local region has been set up is a great introduction to the cloud services offered by AWS, and where they fit overall. So what I did late last night is to get out a highlighter, of course, and map to exactly the same view you'd have a console what services are available in AWS. And you can see that it's not all of them. So that's a significant point. You might say, well, okay, well, there's not all the services. That means it's not ready to be used. Now, that's not the case. What's happened is that they've deployed the services that fit into some broad categories. Those categories are really the ones that are probably going to prevent some people from saying, I'm going to put my workload into a cloud provider. That cloud provider is in another country. They go, whoa, hang on a second. There's latency problems. There's there's potential regulatory compliance problems with data sovereignty. Whether that's perceived or not doesn't really matter. It still stops people from making that move. And that's really roughly where these services fit. So you'll see that they've, if I'm clicking on the slide correctly, there I am. I think I've just jumped one ahead, but that's okay. You'll see, in fact, I'll just go through all of them. What you'll see there is that in red, these are infrastructures as service. We'll go through them in a little bit more detail, but those are the broad, big compute and storage blocks that probably 80% of people are using when it comes to running their IT estate in the cloud or in AWS. What goes with that, of course, the security and infrastructure management. So I want to have my infrastructure there, but I need to manage it. I don't like this idea that it's just sitting somewhere in the cloud and I've got to log in over an RDP or a SSH session and see what's happening inside my server. You want to be able to manage that like you would manage your infrastructure locally. Similarly with security, always the question that comes up, always answered with the same response, which is that security is the number one priority of AWS and probably of any cloud provider would give you a similar message, is that security is at the forefront. And I think just with us generally, the real messaging is that security is not better or worse in the cloud, it's different. For some companies, it can be made better because it gives you access to resources that you just didn't have or you couldn't afford. And so in that respect, you're able to find far more secure solutions. And just an example, to try and get PCI DSS compliance, to do that yourself versus getting it out of AWS. If you're a smallish provider, it's going to cost you a lot of money. That's going to be a significant amount in your business, or you can go to AWS, and it's a great deal quicker and easier to implement.
And I think that's key, is that firstly, the physical security of those availability zones is incredible. It's certainly of a world-class level and way better than anybody can actually have in their own data center at that type of scale. Nobody actually knows where the data centers are, and that's one of the key reasons is that's really kept as top secret, so to ensure that the security is there even at that particular level. So it's a security from a physical point of view. AWS works on a shared security model, which means that as the user of the system, you have a certain responsibility as well in making sure that your applications that you're running have certain levels of security around that as well. So if you're not familiar with the shared security model, I would certainly recommend speaking to a partner like Cascade to make sure that your security is bedded down properly through your environment. So even if you've set up your AWS environments yourselves, get us to have a look at it so that we can make sure that you are secure.
That's right. I mean, if you were to lose a hard drive in a server or a hard drive array inside AWS, you would have no worry about physical security of that data because it gets demagnetized and powdered before it gets disposed of. So there's no chance of losing data. However, you still have to provide ways to secure your network above layer 2 typically, and also things like what's happening inside your operating system, your application or your application code, is that exposed vulnerabilities. All those sorts of things are still up to you, but the tools are there and they're available for you to use. And then, interestingly, that really is the bulk of it. Can I run my workloads inside AWS in Cape Town, particularly my traditional workloads, so not the new serverless kind of stuff, which is very exciting. But many companies are really. And you also have the options for integrating your current systems, and there's a good case to be made for looking at hybrid infrastructure here. Now, local, and you're very easy to get these, or much easier, I should say, more feasible to get systems talking to each other at low latency. So there are tools to provide that integration as well. Things like API Gateway are really good. You can address resources through the REST API, and that can kick off things like Lambda functions and then continue with whatever needs to be done. So you can start to get some of that power of the cloud augmented with your local applications if you're not ready to make any kind of move just yet.
So last year, My Broadband did a study on what people were utilizing the cloud for, and they had about a 66% cloud adoption rate across all levels of cloud. But when they asked what was the most common thing that people were utilizing cloud for, it was backup and disaster recovery. Those were the top two utilizations for cloud. So it's quite clear from this that if you are a cloud user and that's what you want to use it to, well, you're good to go with the solution over here. What we would like is obviously to see a lot of people utilizing it for far more broader uses, to have your compute in the cloud. But when it comes to cloud, we have constantly said that just using infrastructure as a service and utilizing those components is your base level of cloud usage. And where cloud really starts making a difference is where you start using it for your competitive advantage, where you start doing things like workflow, like serverless, where you start creating your applications to be cloud native applications in terms of scalability, flexibility, etc. That is where your competitive advantage really lies, in utilizing these types of services. Russ, would you say we're good to go with those kind of services as well?
I would, absolutely. And what's quite interesting there is we've seen this a few times. We saw it now with the need to just basic remote work, and how much easier it was for those companies who embraced technology in the cloud. Smaller companies, some bigger companies as well. But how much more easier it was for them to retain, remain productive, and have business continuity going on. Definitely, there's opportunity to go and start using these new services. In fact, every time we chat about backup and infrastructure as a service, I feel a slight twinge of boredom, not because these are bad services, but because I know that there's so much on the other side of that that people are going to benefit from. But that's kind of the journey you have to take. And I guess it's a little bit, and it's important. It's an important thing for people to know, particularly if you're not in the technology or the IT game, is that sometimes are we speaking gibberish? Are we just trying to sell people the next amazing thing because we think it's cool? But it was a little bit like if you watched what happened during this pandemic, is that there was just this initial lag phase where everybody was going, how bad can it be? Are we being silly? Why are we talking about it even sometimes? And just yesterday, I had to go and pick up some groceries, and it just struck me how different it was that I drove into a parking lot, parked my car, had someone come to my car. I didn't want, they didn't touch my boot. I had to close my boot, and it's a case of how well prepared could you have been for those types of eventualities. I mean, that's an extreme case, but in every business, there's always going to be some sort of external threat. And you need to have a look at it from both angles. How will I get better at what I do? That's really opening up possibility for the business, which is one of our principles or values that we work around. And the other side is also how do I just reduce that risk. So definitely companies should be looking towards that within the context of their businesses.
Right. Now, obviously, once you've got a cloud environment up and running, one of the key components is actually the monitoring of it, the management of it. So there are a host of those servers as well. Let's run through a couple of those.
There are indeed. Before we do that, I just wanted to mention this is obviously infrastructure as a service only, just for people to get an idea of what that is. Essentially, we're talking about service and storage, which is in here. There's a couple of things sort of missing. Kubernetes. For those Kubernetes fans, I'm sure it's coming soon, EKS, and then Lightsail, which is kind of like a dumbed down version of EC2, if I can call that. So I'm not really feeling like I'm going to miss that. We don't tend not to use it because it's just very limited in terms of what you can do after that. You can run a server, cool. You can do a few other things. I'm playing it down, but eventually you'll be to the point I can got to get this onto EC2.
Yeah.
So everything you need there
And
in terms of managing.
just before you, just before you move off that slide, there was a service there that I also think is a very important one. If we can just go back one more, let me just go up there. And the one that I wanted to mention was S3 Glacier. And S3 Glacier's claim to fame is really the cheapest archival storage that you can get. So you're looking at $1 per terabyte per month. So really a great opportunity if you're a company out there that you have lots of data that you need to archive, whether it's for compliancy or you just don't want to lose that data. S3 Glacier is a wonderful way of cheaply storing all of that information.
Yeah, it really is. That's where we want to keep, to a $1 terabyte. That's the goal. We want to, on these things that are previously referred to as boring, quite flippantly. I'm sorry I did that, but I still do find them quite boring. But in reality, we want to bring the costs down on those things. So you don't want to be paying a fortune for storage, man. That's crazy. It's a bunch of hard disks. It should be secure. It should be reliable. Yes, it should do all of those things. But the drive should be to keep the cost down on that, obviously without sacrificing reliability and those sorts of things. And so, and we can talk about the durability and reliability guarantees around S3 and around Glacier, and you'll know there'll be absolutely no problem there for people. So 100% right. On infrastructure management, there's quite a few services around here. I did chuckle because I looked at it and I saw roughly, we're running compute and storage and networking in the cloud. That's the stuff that's really come through a great deal of. Amazon want you to move your stuff there, so they've made those tools available for us locally, specifically database migration service and server migration service. And there's also a bunch of third-party tools, one of which is actually available at no cost, which is a company that was bought by Amazon, and that will help you get your workloads into the cloud. Database migration service actually is quite a significant service. So it does a lot of the hard work that you would have paid quite a bit for around your ETL processes. It does a lot of that inherently. So really good service. So it's something that it's pretty obvious. We want you in the cloud. Here's the tools to do so. And then when you're there, here's all the cool stuff you can use from a management point of view. Systems management server, as an example, is highly underrated as a service. People say, what about patch management? You can do that. You can automate patch management. You can build in all the baseline rules that you would have wanted to build in through any kind of other, management system on your VMware or your Microsoft environments or whatever else it is that you're using traditionally. The other one that's worth noting is something called CloudFormation, and this is not, so CloudFormation's infrastructure is code, right? Basically, it's like describing what you want your infrastructure to look like in a file, so JSON or a YAML file, right? And then when you click go, all of those resources get rolled out, controls can be put in place. You can make it interactive and say, I want to be able to, define which security groups and names things and all those kind of things. Very, very powerful. What is actually quite exciting about it, besides that, because that maybe just excites those people who are into the automation and like it, but for companies looking for a disaster recovery solution at a really low cost, you could describe your infrastructure in the cloud. You don't have to roll these things out. You don't have to have servers running and all of those good things. If you have a problem, you can then go and invoke this CloudFormation template to spin up your infrastructure for you. It's not going to give you an hour turnaround. It's likely to be obviously longer than that. It might be surprisingly shorter, so we're not talking about weeks. But you're able to get infrastructure up and running. You're able to put networking resources in place, which will start to just redirect all of your users to those new instances and servers and resources. You might have a lag or a gap in some of your data, which you would have to recapture or upload. But for many companies, that's okay. That's from nothing to that is a massive leap. So that's a really cool service to have locally. And on the security side, as you've mentioned before, you'll notice there's something there called IAM, and that's used just universally throughout AWS. So it isn't highlighted, but it's kind of a global service. So it's not something that needs to be necessarily regional. And AWS Artifact, also an interesting one. And the reason I'm sort of looking at that and thinking, why is that in there? AWS Artifacts is really just a service that allows you to get your compliance certificates against various regulatory frameworks, whether that's ISO 27001, whatever version of it is, HIPAA compliance, PCI compliance, all of those are available. You can go and give those to your auditors to say, look, I've got a compliance certificate. But it's available locally, which makes me wonder at what stage will we be able to produce that compliance certificate for the POPI or POPIA.
Yeah,
yeah.
For sure.
So that's
now,
just a hunch.
I was mentioning earlier on that utilizing cloud as your competitive advantage, and part of that process is creating these cloud native applications. Certainly, if you are a company who is on the digitization journey, you're looking at a digital transformation process, the likelihood of you creating an app and having some development done in a just kind of a DevOps environment, I guess, and having that done as part of the process is very, very likely. When it comes to the developer tools, though, not all of those are on AWS at the moment. So, Russ, do you want to take us through some of those dev tools that are available?
Sure. I think initially when I looked at the developer tools, and really those ones probably fit mostly inside your CI/CD kind of framework. So the developer tools in that respect are not the only developer tools that are available. Something like API Gateway could be considered a tool for developers because you can write your own APIs inside that and host them. But the code deploy is really just a part. If you look at your whole CI/CD pipeline, when you've done your testing and you've gone through your commit, and you're now ready to deploy into production, and that is available. When I looked at it, I thought, okay, that's kind of odd because the stuff that's behind it, in other words, your repo, which is code commit, or code build, which is actually a facility to actually build and test. Why are those things not in there? And I thought, well, they don't really have to because they're not necessarily things that are particularly sensitive to things like latency. Whereas something like code deploy, where you need to interact with the resources directly and get stuff deployed, there may be some benefit to have that locally. And then Exfil, which is actually a very cool service, probably not for everybody until you kind of at that cloud native stage where you wanting to really optimize your deployments. And essentially, that's going to have a look at your code and look for various attributes within there, basically. So it's a good tool for that.
Yeah.
On the analytics side, you're the expert on analytics, and you can see that available there. We're looking forward to getting the rest of the stuff in there as well.
Yeah. So the AWS has some great analytics and data tools. At the moment, you've only got Elastic MapReduce, so that's there, and then you've got the Kinesis video. No, it's the Kinesis streams. That's
data streams, yeah.
Kinesis data streams that's available at the moment, and with that as well, obviously all the machine learning tools, the SageMaker tools, which will only be coming in a lot later, I'm sure, around that side. Just wanted to make a comment that what I was saying about the developer side, nothing stops you from developing on any platform and moving it through into AWS. So if you're thinking, okay, well, not all the developer tools are there, so what does that mean? Well, you can develop on any platform and deploy into AWS. I think it's also important to mention at this time, as I think a lot of people might be listening to this thinking, well, what about Windows workloads? And all Windows workloads are available in AWS. In fact, somebody asked me the other day, how come AWS is able to run Windows systems? Well, they actually are one of the biggest customers of Microsoft and have been running Microsoft workloads. So if you think about SQL Server and you think about Windows Server, they've been running it for longer than Microsoft has been running it in Azure. So great environments for Windows workloads, great environments for Linux workloads. It really can cater for everything.
Yeah, tons of operational experience and very, very slick. So I would agree with you on that one.
All right, so we've got...
You're all right on the developer tool, sorry, but also to avoid risking downplaying them, you're right. All of the SDKs are available for. There's numerous tools and plugins for the different frameworks that you might use, including just being able to deploy directly from Visual Studio and those sorts of things. I'm not a developer, so I can't get too deep on those for people, but those tools are all available. So there's nothing stopping a person from deploying an AWS directly.
All right. So I think the next question that we want to answer is now what? Okay, so the local data center is up and running. You can go today. You can get a server. You can get storage. Now what? Whoops.
Now,
there you go.
Oops, I think we both clicked at the same time.
Yeah.
There you go. So now what? Yeah. So maybe for perhaps people who are not so directly technical, or people who maybe not involved in the running of the IT or the tech inside their business, these are the questions. Like, okay, big deal. Right, I've got compute and storage and management and all this cool stuff. Hooray! What should I start thinking about? And the real thing is that the obstacles have been removed that typically have held some people back, like latency. Can I run this application inside AWS? Actually, chatting to someone yesterday, we designed kind of an application and a client and server part of the application, which had to have some workarounds based on some of the devices that we're using, which now looks quite different. So we're able to do a little bit more and probably do it at a lower cost. So getting your databases into AWS, getting the service into database, there should be no technical or legal reason or regulatory reason not to look at that. So that definitely should be on the table if you're considering anything inside your IT estate. The same with backups and disaster recovery. Fantastic opportunities, I think, for people. A lot of the complexity is removed. The cost is massively reduced. I think that's going to benefit many businesses who don't implement them to the level that they should, or maybe sometimes not at all, or are looking for something a little bit more than that. And that kind of leans into hybrid storage as well, because like you mentioned, the cost of storage, particularly in services like Glacier and S3, where you can tier your storage and you can have lifecycle rules and quite a lot of intelligence built into that storage at an extremely low cost. Yes, you can buy devices that will do that for you, but you have to buy them. That's the key, and you have to see, provision what you need for 3 and 5 years time. Whereas you can start at 1 megabyte or less, and go up to how many petabytes you want to store in the cloud and everything in between. Obviously, on the application side of things, you've got a gateway available to you. So if you want to start accessing cloud services and building features into your application that you would like to use some cloud services for, API gateways available locally, great low latency on that. Interesting gateway actually, because sometimes the more requests that get sent, because it scales automatically, you start getting faster response time. So I read some interesting articles around that, which surprised people. But I guess logically, as you start provisioning more resources to handle more requests, you start getting that throughput going up quite a lot. And Lambda is available to integrate those applications and also to do some local processing. So maybe you just want to do something with your particular application or workflow. You can start to use Lambda for that. There's a bunch of, this really fits IoT use cases really well, of course. In some cases, IoT does require for it to be quite low latency between sending something and getting a response to it. So hoping we see those soon. But in the meantime, for things like pre-processing, if you're sending stuff through into some analytics engines and trying to do some machine learning models and training, you can start to run Lambdas locally, which again will have some low latency to maybe send some responses back before putting the whole IoT pipeline into the cloud.
Right. So there you have it, a host of great services that are available right now. You've got from backup and DR right through to deploying your entire infrastructure environment and having it on the cloud, having it safe and secure, and setting up that redundancy as well. I would highly recommend that if you are considering the move, to chat to a partner like Cascade. And just to give you a quick overview of the type of stuff that we do, we land up doing different things for different market segments. On the enterprise segment, we can assist with a POC concept, great with putting together projects, but also those kind of customers. So if you're an enterprise customer, typically you will be multi-cloud, and we can do multi-cloud cost optimization and management around that space as well. So cloud costs do tend to run away due to the fact that it's so easy to spin things up in the cloud and to test projects, but quite often the management of it lands up being a hassle of understanding what infrastructure you've got set up and where that infrastructure is, and even who spun that infrastructure up and are they still using it. So we can assist with that process. Advanced technologies like AI, machine learning stuff, you can chat to us about that as well. In the small and medium business space, Cascade is about supplying you with always-on IT with a 99.99% uptime guarantee. It's a pay-as-you-use monthly pricing model, so moving away from a CapEx-focused IT environment to an OpEx-focused IT environment, really allowing you to access the computing power that many enterprises have at their disposal and to be able to scale up and scale down as you need. Great opportunity for low-cost disaster recovery and a great opportunity to utilize those advanced services that many of the enterprise customers utilize, like machine learning, like forecasting for your data, etc. So give Cascade a shout if you're interested in that. And then lastly, we've got a fantastic opportunity for startups. So if you're a startup, get hold of us. We've got special packages for startups as well. Don't forget about the dev space across all three. We have a full DevOps environment that we can assist you with your development needs. And go through that as well. Cascade is certified, obviously, in the AWS space, but also in Cloud Health, also in New Relic, and also Proposify, which is we're a new partner in Proposify, which is about creating fantastic sales proposals and documents and increasing your closure rate on those. Our details over here. If you're interested in any of the above and any of the services, or you want to chat to us and find out how we can assist you on your cloud journey and your digitization journey, please get hold of us at info@cascade.cloud. There's our telephone number. You can email me, kevin@cascade.cloud, or russell@cascade.cloud, and we'd be glad to chat to you further and to help out your business as well. So that's it from me. Russ, any final words from your side?
I think you summed it all up perfectly. So,
okay, we're losing
touch with us if you want to, get into an account and try a few things out. We're happy to help you.
All right. So with that, have a wonderful cloudy day, and we'll see you in the clouds. Cheers.
Cheers.